The sun was setting over downtown Atlanta, painting the sky in beautiful shades of orange and purple. Lisa Chen, a 32-year-old attorney, gathered her files from her desk, said goodbye to the cleaning lady with her usual warm smile, and headed to her car in the parking garage. It had been a long day, the kind where coffee barely kept her eyes open through back-to-back client meetings and endless paperwork. She loved her job at the civil rights law firm, though. Today's cases had included helping a family fight unfair eviction and supporting a group of workers facing discrimination at their workplace. The satisfaction of making a real difference in people's lives made all the late nights worth it. Lisa checked her phone as she got into her silver Lexus, a proud purchase she'd made after winning her first major case. Her mom had left 3 messages asking about Sunday dinner. She smiled, thinking about her mother's persistent worry that she worked too hard and needed to settle down. At least there'd be amazing soul food waiting for her this weekend. The evening traffic was lighter than usual as she drove down the familiar streets of her city. The radio played softly in the background, some old-school R&B that reminded her of dancing in the kitchen with her parents as a kid. She was thinking about the hot bath and takeout Thai food waiting for her at home when she noticed the flash of blue lights in her rearview mirror. Lisa felt her shoulders tense, but she kept her composure. She'd done nothing wrong. She was driving exactly at the speed limit. Her tags were current, and all her lights were working. She checked them just yesterday. Growing up, her father had taught her exactly what to do in situations like this. It's not about being right, he'd always said. It's about being smart and staying safe. Following the protocol ingrained in her since she was old enough to drive, Lisa turned on her interior lights, pulled over to a well-lit spot near a 24-hour convenience store, and placed her hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel where they would be clearly visible. She noticed a couple of people outside the store watching, witnesses, her lawyer mind automatically noted. Through her side mirror, she watched the police officer approach. His hand was already resting on his weapon, an unnecessary gesture that made her heart rate pick up slightly. But Lisa remained calm, drawing on years of courtroom experience. She noticed his body language was tense, aggressive even, before he'd even reached her window. Lisa took a deep, quiet breath. Her dashcam was running, another habit her father had insisted on. Her phone was in its mount, easily accessible if needed. She was prepared, professional, and knew her rights. But something in the officer's approach told her this wouldn't be a routine traffic stop. The knot in her stomach tightened as the officer's footsteps grew closer. The evening had started so normally, just another Tuesday heading home from work. But Lisa had learned through both professional experience and personal life that normal could change in an instant. As the officer reached her window, she steadied herself for whatever might come next, remembering all the training, advice, and life lessons that had prepared her for moments like this. She could see the officer's nameplate clearly now in her side mirror. Officer P. Barrett. His face was set in a hard expression that seemed out of place for a simple traffic stop. Lisa kept her hands visible and her voice ready to be steady and professional. Years of facing tough situations had taught her that the next few moments would depend heavily on staying composed and aware. The Thai food would have to wait. Right now, she needed all her focus for what was about to unfold. Officer Barrett tapped on Lisa's window with his flashlight, despite the fact that her interior lights were already on. She pressed the button to lower her window, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. The evening air carried the scent of rain about to fall. License and registration, Barrett barked before the window was even fully down. No greeting, no explanation for the stop, no professional courtesy. Lisa noticed his thumb fidgeting near his weapon, though she'd given him no reason for concern. "Good evening, officer," she replied in her measured courtroom voice. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" It was a reasonable question, one she'd asked and answered countless times in her work. The officer's response was immediate and harsh. "I said license and registration." Now, his voice carried a tone that Lisa recognized from her years handling civil rights cases. It was the voice of someone used to unquestioned authority, someone who saw questions as challenges. Lisa kept her voice steady. "Of course, officer. My documents are in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now." She narrated her movements clearly, the way she'd advised countless clients to do. The way her father had taught her. the way that should have made any reasonable officer feel at ease. But Officer Barrett wasn't acting reasonably. As she slowly reached toward the glove compartment, he suddenly slapped his hand against her car door. "What are you hiding in there?" he demanded, though the glove compartment was clearly visible and closed. "Nothing, sir. Just my vehicle documents, as requested." Lisa felt her legal training kick in, mentally recording every detail of this interaction. The time was 7:42 p.m. The convenience store's security cameras would have a clear view. There were now 3 witnesses outside the store watching. Rain started to sprinkle down as Barrett shifted his stance, trying to peer into her back seat. Liz's leather briefcase sat there, along with a gym bag and some case files. Nothing suspicious, nothing unusual for a professional woman heading home from work. "Step out of the vehicle," Barrett ordered, his hand now fully resting on his weapon. The rain was picking up, but Lisa knew this had nothing to do with getting her out of the weather. "Officer, I don't understand. I haven't been told why I'm being stopped, and I don't feel comfortable stepping out without cause." Her words were calm but firm, grounded in her knowledge of the law. She'd advised this same approach to dozens of clients. Barrett's face twisted with anger. "I don't need to explain myself to you." Out of the car. Each word was punctuated with growing hostility. The rain now fell steadily, creating a curtain of water in Lisa's headlights. Lisa's mind raced through her options. She knew her rights, but she also knew the reality of power dynamics in these situations. Her phone was still recording, capturing every word. The dash cam was running. Witnesses were watching. But Barrett seemed to be escalating the situation deliberately, almost as if he wanted a confrontation. She thought of her mother waiting for Sunday dinner, of her clients who needed her, of all the cases on her desk representing people who'd faced similar situations. Her hands remained visible on the steering wheel, her voice remained professional, but her resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about every person who'd ever faced abuse of authority without having the tools to fight back. The rain drummed harder on the roof of her car as Barrett reached for his radio, calling for backup though Lisa had shown zero resistance. She could hear the edge in his voice as he described a non-compliant subject, though her only non-compliance had been asking why she'd been stopped, a constitutional right she'd defended in court numerous times. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating Barrett's face. In that brief moment, Lisa saw something that chilled her more than the rain, not anger, but satisfaction. This was a man who enjoyed the power he wielded, who sought out opportunities to abuse it. She'd seen that look before, in case after case that had crossed her desk. The situation was balanced on a knife's edge. More patrol cars would arrive soon. Lisa knew the next few minutes would be crucial. She was no longer just an attorney heading home from work. She was about to become either another statistic or an agent of change. As thunder rolled overhead, she steadied herself for what was coming, knowing that sometimes justice required standing your ground, even in the rain. Thunder cracked overhead as Lisa made a quick decision. Without taking her hands off the steering wheel, she pressed the emergency contact button on her phone. A text message would now be sent to her law firm partner with her current location. It was a safety protocol they'd set up after handling one too many cases of police misconduct. "Officer Barrett," she said clearly, making sure her phone's recording picked up his name. "I want to cooperate fully, but I need to understand why I've been stopped. It's my right to ask this question." She noticed his nameplate was now partially obscured by his raincoat, another detail she filed away mentally. The convenience store's lights cast strange shadows through the rain. Lisa could see people inside now, some holding up their phones. More witnesses, more documentation. She'd learned early in her career that documentation could make or break a case. "You lawyers think you know everything," Barrett sneered, showing the first sign that he'd noticed her briefcase and professional attire. "Always hiding behind your fancy words and rights." His hand moved from his weapon to his radio again. "Dispatch, requesting additional units. Subject is being argumentative." Lisa kept her voice steady, though her heart was racing. "Officer, I'm simply asking for clarification. Nothing in my behavior has been argumentative. I'd like to note that your body camera appears to be turned off, which is against department policy." That got his attention. Barrett's face twisted as he realized she knew department procedures. The rain ran down his face, but he made no move to wipe it away. His focus was entirely on her, and not in a professional way. Inside her car, Lisa's phone quietly connected to her law firm's emergency system. Years of handling civil rights cases had taught them to prepare for moments like these. Her location was being tracked, her audio was being recorded and uploaded to secure servers, and her firm's rapid response team was being notified. "Last chance," Barrett growled, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Step out of the vehicle, or I'll remove you myself." His hand moved back to his weapon, a motion Lisa knew was meant to intimidate. She took a deep breath, remembering all the clients she'd represented in similar situations. "Officer, I am exercising my right to remain in my vehicle since no probable cause has been stated. I'm happy to provide my license and registration while remaining in my car. I'm also informing you that this interaction is being recorded for my safety and yours." Lightning flashed again, illuminating the growing number of spectators at the convenience store. Some had umbrellas now, determined to watch despite the weather. Lisa saw one person on their phone, likely calling the local news. In today's world, incidents like this didn't stay quiet for long. Barrett's radio crackled with a response. Backup was 3 minutes out. Lisa used those precious moments to press another button on her phone, activating the law firm's direct line to the police department's Internal Affairs Division. It was a connection they'd established after years of dealing with similar cases. The rain drummed harder on her roof as Barrett paced beside her car, clearly frustrated that she knew her rights and wasn't intimidated into compliance. His boots splashed through puddles that reflected the flashing blue lights, creating an almost surreal scene. Lisa's phone vibrated quietly. Her law firm partner had received her location and was already en route. The system was working exactly as they designed it. Years of representing victims of police misconduct had taught them to create safety nets, to build systems of protection and documentation. "You people always make things difficult," Barrett muttered, loud enough for her recording to catch the prejudiced undertone. Another piece of evidence, another detail that would matter later. Lisa remained silent, knowing that sometimes silence was the most powerful response. More lights appeared in her rearview mirror, backup was arriving. But so was help. Through the rain-streaked glass, she could see familiar cars pulling into the convenience store parking lot. Her firm's rapid response team was already here, ready to document, witness, and intervene if necessary. The next few moments would be crucial. Barrett didn't know it yet, but his actions tonight wouldn't stay hidden in the rain and darkness. Every word, every gesture, every violation of protocol was being recorded, documented, and prepared for what would come next. Lisa had spent years building cases against officers who abused their power. She never expected to become a case herself, but she was ready. The sound of approaching sirens mixed with the steady drumming of rain. Lisa could see Barrett's patience wearing thin as more witnesses gathered despite the weather. His backup hadn't arrived yet, but her support system was already in place. She could see her law firm colleagues positioning themselves strategically around the scene. Without warning, Barrett yanked her car door handle. Finding it locked, he pounded on her window. "Get out, now." His voice carried a dangerous edge that Lisa had heard too many times in her client's stories, but this time she was prepared. "Officer, I am not resisting," she stated clearly for her recording. "I'm choosing to stay in my vehicle since no violation has been stated. This is my legal right." Her voice remained steady, though her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. The convenience store's neon signs reflected off the wet pavement, creating an eerie glow around Barrett as he reached for something on his belt. Lisa's heart jumped, but it wasn't his weapon, it was a baton. He positioned himself to strike her window. "Officer Barrett," Lisa projected her voice with courtroom authority, "my colleagues are filming this interaction. Breaking my window would be destruction of property and an excessive use of force. There are at least 12 witnesses present." He hesitated, finally noticing the small crowd of professional-looking people who had gathered alongside the curious onlookers. Many held phones, documenting everything. Lisa's law firm partner, Mrs. Chen, stood prominently in front, her tablet displaying what appeared to be direct communication with the police department. Barrett's radio crackled. His backup was almost here. But so was someone else. Through her rain-streaked mirrors, Lisa saw a familiar vehicle pull up. The gold badge on the windshield identified it as internal affairs. Her firm's emergency protocol was working perfectly. You need to understand something. Barrett leaned close to her window, his voice dripping with anger. Out here, I'm the law. The rain had plastered his hair to his forehead, making him look more desperate than authoritative. Lisa met his gaze steadily. No, Officer Barrett. The law is the law, and right now you're breaking it. She nodded toward the gathering crowd. Everything you've done tonight is being recorded. Your body camera is off, you've provided no reason for this stop, and you've threatened violence against a compliant citizen. His face contorted with rage. In one sudden motion, he slammed his palm against her window. The sound was loud enough to make several witnesses jump, but Lisa didn't flinch. She'd spent years teaching her clients to stand firm in the face of intimidation. Blue and red lights filled her mirrors as multiple police vehicles finally arrived. But they weren't alone. A news van had pulled up, its crew already setting up despite the rain. Local activists that Lisa had worked with on various cases were arriving too, having been alerted by the convenience store witnesses' social media posts. Officer, a commanding voice cut through the rain. A higher-ranking officer was approaching, his insignia identifying him as a sergeant. Barrett's demeanor changed instantly, his aggressive stance softening. Lisa remained still, her hands visible, her phone still recording. She'd experienced enough courtroom victories to know when the tide was turning. The documentation was clear, the witnesses were numerous, and Barrett's behavior was indefensible. Mrs. Chen approached the sergeant, tablet in hand, displaying what appeared to be Barrett's service record. As a civil rights firm, they maintained detailed records of officer complaints and incidents. Barrett's file, it seemed, was substantial. The rain had begun to ease, but the tension in the air remained thick. Lisa knew this moment would have been very different without her resources, without her knowledge of the law, without the protocols her firm had put in place. She thought about all her clients who hadn't been so prepared, so supported. This wasn't just about one traffic stop anymore. This was about documenting a pattern, about creating change, about showing that standing up to abuse of power was possible when you had the right tools and support. As the sergeant began addressing Barrett, Lisa knew this incident would become a teaching moment, not just for the police department, but for everyone watching. Sergeant Thompson's arrival changed the entire atmosphere of the scene. He was a veteran officer who'd worked with Lisa's firm on community outreach programs, and his presence brought a sense of professionalism that had been sorely lacking. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but puddles still reflected the swirling lights of multiple police vehicles. "What's the situation here?" Thompson asked, his experienced eyes taking in everything. Lisa's professional appearance, Barrett's aggressive stance, the gathering crowd of witnesses, and the news crew setting up their equipment. Before Barrett could speak, Mrs. Chen stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Sergeant, we have documented evidence of Officer Barrett conducting an unauthorized stop with his body camera turned off. He's threatened a compliant citizen and attempted to escalate the situation unnecessarily." Lisa remained in her car, hands visible, still recording everything. She watched through her mirrors as Thompson's expression changed while reviewing the footage on Mrs. Chen's tablet. The video showed everything from the moment Barrett first approached her car, his aggression clear and unprovoked. "Officer Barrett," Thompson's voice carried the weight of authority, stepped back from the vehicle. Barrett hesitated, his face a mix of anger and growing uncertainty. "That's an order, officer." More police vehicles had arrived, creating a circle of flashing lights that illuminated the scene like a stage. Among them was a familiar face, Captain Rivera from Internal Affairs, someone Lisa had worked with on previous police misconduct cases. "Ms. Chen," Rivera called out as she approached, referring to Lisa, "Are you all right?" The captain's presence was another testament to the effectiveness of the law firm's emergency protocols. They'd built these relationships over years of working to improve police-community relations. "I'm fine, Captain," Lisa responded clearly, her voice carrying to the news cameras now filming the scene. "I've been compliant throughout this interaction while asserting my legal rights. Everything has been documented." Thompson was now reviewing Lisa's perfectly valid license and registration through her still rolled-down window. His professional demeanor was a stark contrast to Barrett's earlier aggression. "Ms. Chen, can you tell me what happened from the beginning?" Lisa recounted the events precisely, her lawyer's training evident in her clear factual narrative. As she spoke, more community members arrived, local leaders, activists, and even some of her former clients who'd seen the social media posts about the incident. The convenience store owner had come out now, offering to provide their security camera footage. "I saw everything," he stated firmly. "That officer was way out of line. We got it all on tape." Barrett stood by his patrol car, his earlier bravado deflating as he watched his supervisors review video evidence from multiple sources. His backup had arrived too late to support his version of events, and now they were witnesses to the proper handling of the situation. Mrs. Chen was speaking with the news crew, her words measured and impactful. "This incident highlights why our firm maintains detailed records of officer conduct and why we've established direct lines of communication with department leadership. When officers abuse their power, the community needs to be prepared to respond." Captain Rivera approached Lisa's window again. "Ms. Chen, we'll need your formal statement, but I want you to know we take these incidents very seriously. Officer Barrett's record is concerning." She glanced at the officer, who was now being questioned by other internal affairs officers. The gathered crowd had grown, but remained peaceful and organized. Lisa recognized many faces: community leaders, other lawyers, activists, and ordinary citizens united in their desire to witness justice being served. Some held up their phones, still recording, ensuring that every moment was documented. "Your firm's response system worked exactly as designed," Thompson commented to Lisa, genuine respect in his voice. "This is why we've been advocating for more cooperation between law enforcement and civil rights attorneys." Lisa finally felt her shoulders relax slightly, though she maintained her professional composure. Through her windshield, she could see Barrett being escorted to a supervisor's vehicle, his face a mask of barely contained rage. But he was powerless now. The evidence was too clear, the witnesses too numerous, the documentation too thorough. The news crew was interviewing witnesses, their cameras capturing the professional response of the supervising officers alongside Barrett's earlier misconduct. This wasn't just about one traffic stop anymore. It was becoming a powerful example of how preparation, community support, and professional protocols could stand up to abuse of power. By midnight, the incident had spread across social media like wildfire. Lisa sat in her law firm's conference room, surrounded by colleagues reviewing footage from multiple angles. The rain had stopped, but its effects lingered in the puddles outside that reflected the city lights. "Look at this," Mrs. Chen said, pulling up a Twitter feed on the large screen. "The convenience store footage has over 1 million views already." The video clearly showed Barrett's aggressive approach and Lisa's calm handling of the situation. The comments section was filled with people sharing similar experiences. Lisa's phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages of support. Her mother had called 5 times, switching between worry and pride in rapid succession. "You could have been hurt," she'd said, before adding, "but you stood up for what's right, just like your father taught you." The local news was running the story as their lead. "Civil rights attorney documents police misconduct in real time," the headline read. They showed clips from multiple angles, the convenience store cameras, witness videos, and the firm's own recordings. Barrett's face was everywhere, his actions exposed for everyone to see. "There's more," said Tom, one of the firm's investigators, walking in with a thick folder. "We've found 8 similar complaints against Barrett in the last year alone. 3 of them happened at the same intersection where he stopped you." He spread the documents on the conference table, each one telling a similar story of intimidation and abuse of power. Lisa stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. How many people did he stop who didn't have a law degree? She wondered aloud. How many didn't have a whole firm backing them up? How many were too scared to report it? The door opened and Captain Rivera walked in, looking tired but determined. "We've been reviewing the footage," she said, accepting the coffee Mrs. Chen offered. "Barrett's been placed on immediate administrative leave, but that's just the start. We're opening a full investigation into his entire service record." Lisa's phone lit up with another notification. A community organization she'd worked with was organizing a peaceful gathering for the next day. They wanted her to speak about knowing your rights during police encounters. The responses to their announcement were pouring in. People wanted to learn, to be prepared. "Look at this," Tom said, pointing to his laptop. Someone had started a hashtag with Lisa's quote from the incident, #TheLoisTheLaw. It was trending locally, with people sharing resources about civil rights and police accountability. Mrs. Chen pulled up another video, this one from a dashboard camera in a passing car. It showed the moment when Barrett realized he was being recorded from multiple angles, the instant he understood he wasn't in control anymore. The look on his face spoke volumes about power dynamics shifting. "The department's public affairs office wants to meet tomorrow," Captain Rivera said, checking her phone. "They're talking about using this as a training example, how not to conduct a traffic stop, and how proper oversight should work." Lisa nodded, remembering something her father used to say, "Change happens one moment at a time, one person standing up at a time." She looked at the evidence spread across the conference room, videos, statements, documents. Each piece told part of a larger story about accountability and justice. Outside, the city was quieting down for the night, but social media was still buzzing. People were sharing their own stories, offering support, asking questions about their rights. Local law firms were posting Know Your Rights guides. Community organizations were planning workshops. "We should set up a hotline," Lisa suggested, her legal mind already thinking ahead. People need a way to report these incidents, to get help before things escalate. Her colleagues nodded, already pulling up resources and making plans. The night wore on as they worked, fueled by coffee and purpose. This wasn't just about one incident anymore, it was becoming a movement for transparency and accountability. Lisa's phone kept buzzing with messages from other attorneys, community leaders, and activists, all wanting to help build something bigger from this moment. As she finally gathered her things to head home, Lisa paused at the window again. The city stretched out before her, millions of stories happening behind lit windows. How many other Barretts were out there? How many people needed help standing up for their rights? Tomorrow would bring meetings, interviews, and planning sessions. But tonight had already started something important, a reminder that when preparation meets opportunity, justice has a better chance of prevailing. 3 months after that rainy night, Lisa stood at a podium in front of City Hall. The summer sun was bright, and the crowd that gathered was even bigger than expected. She adjusted the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces, community members, activists, fellow lawyers, and most importantly, people who'd been inspired to share their own stories. "Today marks a new chapter," she began, her voice carrying across the plaza. "The Police Accountability Board has just voted unanimously to implement new training protocols and oversight measures." The crowd erupted in applause, but this was just the beginning of her announcement. Behind her sat the police chief and several community leaders. The investigation into Barrett had revealed a pattern that couldn't be ignored. In the weeks following Lisa's incident, more people had come forward, emboldened by her example. Their stories painted a clear picture of systemic issues that needed addressing. "But this isn't just about one officer," Lisa continued, remembering all the late nights her firm had spent building their case. "This is about creating lasting change." She gestured to the thick stack of papers on the podium, the new accountability measures that would help prevent similar incidents in the future. The changes were significant. Every patrol car would now have working cameras that couldn't be turned off during stops. Officers would be required to state the reason for traffic stops immediately. A civilian oversight committee would review body camera footage regularly. But most importantly, a new community police partnership program would help bridge the gap between law enforcement and the people they served. In the crowd, Lisa spotted Mrs. Chen holding up a tablet, streaming the announcement lit for their social media followers. The hashtag #TheLoisTheLaw had evolved into a movement, with people across the country sharing resources and supporting each other in standing up for their rights. "Remember that convenience store?" Lisa asked the crowd. "It's now a designated safe spot for documenting police interactions." The store owner stood up, receiving his own round of applause. More businesses had joined the program, creating a network of safe spaces across the city. The police chief stepped up to the podium next. "Officer Barrett's termination was just the start," she announced. "We've reviewed the records of every officer under our command. Those who don't meet our new standards of conduct are being retrained or removed." Her commitment to change felt genuine. She'd been working closely with community leaders for months. Lisa thought back to that night, how different things could have been without preparation and support. Her firm had since launched a free app that helped people know their rights and document interactions with law enforcement. It had been downloaded over 100,000 times. But the real change, Lisa continued after returning to the podium, is happening in our communities. She pointed to the new Community Rights Education Center that had opened downtown. Knowledge is power, and we're making sure everyone has access to it. The center offered free legal workshops, hosted community meetings, and provided resources for people dealing with law enforcement encounters. It had become a model that other cities were looking to replicate. Lisa's firm had received calls from lawyers across the country wanting to set up similar programs. In the crowd, she spotted some familiar faces, people who'd been helped by the center, who'd found their voices and were now helping others. There was the young student who'd started a rights awareness group at her college, the retired teacher who now volunteered giving Know Your Rights presentations, the small business owner who'd organized his entire neighborhood to install security cameras. "This is what justice looks like," Lisa said, her voice filled with emotion. "Not just punishing wrongdoing, but preventing it. Not just winning one case, but changing the system. Not just helping one person, but empowering everyone." The new policies were already showing results. Complaints against officers had dropped significantly. More importantly, community trust was growing. The police department's community outreach programs were seeing record participation, and officers who exemplified the new standards were being recognized and promoted. 3 months ago, I was alone in my car, facing an officer who thought he was above the law, Lisa concluded. Today, none of us are alone. We have each other, we have knowledge, and we have the tools to ensure justice is served. The applause that followed wasn't just for her. It was for every person who'd helped make change possible, for every story that had been shared, for every small victory that had led to this moment. As Lisa looked out at the crowd, she saw what her father had always talked about: people coming together, standing up for what's right, making their world a little bit better.